Okay, so let's unpack this source material you shared with us. We're doing a deep dive today into the world of Black Greek letter organizations, BGLOs as they're often called. Your sources, well, they include parts of Black Greek life, Commitment and Connection by Dr. Michael J. Winfield Sr., and also some specific takes from Ivory Jean Cooper and James S. Avery Sr.
Right.
And it sounds like maybe you're thinking about becoming a member. This material definitely lays out some really key things to mull over.
Yeah, definitely.
So our mission here is basically to help you understand, why someone might join, the commitment, which seems pretty real, and what these organizations are like fundamentally about. We're drawing straight from these materials you gave us.
Exactly.
So whether it was movies or family or just, basic curiosity that got you interested, these sources seem like a great place to start thinking about that first step for you.
Right. And the source material, it jumps right into that,
Right.
examining the why.
Right.
Why might you be interested? It acknowledges it could be lots of things. Maybe you saw portrayals in films. Maybe you've got family members in the Divine Nine or, other groups like Sigma Pi Phi.
Or maybe it's simpler, like just wanting to earn your letters, as they say.
Yeah. Or sometimes it surfaces later, right?
Yeah.
Like the source mentions maybe ticking off a retirement bucket list item.
Oh, interesting.
Or perhaps joining a graduate chapter, but maybe with a kind of idealized view of what college was like back then.
Right. Kind of a nostalgia thing, maybe?
Exactly. And, well, this is where that perspective from Ivory Jean Cooper, the one quoted in the sources, it offers a really sharp counterpoint.
Okay. What does he say?
Well, he writes about seeing men, in their 30s, 40s, even 60s, acting in ways he finds. Wow, but his word is cartoonish. He mentions things like cut-off camel pants, unlaced boots, that sort of thing.
Wow. Okay. So he's pretty blunt about it.
Oh, yeah. Very direct. The quote they include is something like, "If you did not join Omega while in college, then face it, certain things you just missed."
That's quite a statement.
It is. But the author, Dr. Winfield, he points out this isn't just about Omega Sci-Fi specifically. It's a broader point that could apply across different BGLOs.
Okay.
The core idea, really, is that the experience as an undergrad versus joining as a grad can be, well, fundamentally different. And maybe bringing those undergrad expectations into graduate life just doesn't always work. It might not be realistic.
That makes sense. Reframing it like that is helpful. So, okay, we've talked about the why. The sources then seem to pivot pretty hard to the how you approach this and what's actually required, the commitment aspect.
Absolutely. They make it super clear that joining, especially if you're looking at a graduate chapter, it demands a significant commitment.
Right.
The material uses that old saying, if the shoe fits, wear it, to really stress the need for serious thought, particularly if you're already established.
Like if you're in your late 30s, 40s, older, you probably have a full plate already. Family, career.
Exactly. Church, maybe other community stuff. Life is busy.
So the big question then becomes, can you realistically fit in the time and, frankly, the energy that a BGLO and that initial membership process needs into a life that's already packed?
That's precisely it. And the source is very clear on this. Yes, these organizations will need your energy, your active participation, but trying to give, 100% of your time, that's not needed, and it's not even possible.
Okay, that's important. So it's not all-consuming.
No, they explicitly say it can't be done. And they really push back on misconceptions here. They state very clearly, Black Greek letter organizations are not high-control groups. They're not cults. They're not street gangs demanding all your time and making you ditch everything else.
That's a really crucial distinction to make, yeah. Directly counters some negative stereotypes you sometimes hear.
It does. They're described instead as voluntary associations, people coming together with shared goals, shared achievements.
But there's a caution in there too, right, about balance.
Yes, there is. A notable one. The source warns that spending excessive time only on Greek life can actually hurt your other important relationships.
At work, home, friends outside the org.
Exactly. And that applies to new members and long-term ones.
Yeah.
So the commitment is definitely real, but it has to be balanced. You can't let it overshadow everything else.
Understood. So commitment, substantial, needs personal assessment, but not all-consuming.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do the sources say these organizations fundamentally are? What's really at their core?
Well, there's one quote from the material that really jumped out at me. It defines the purpose like this. It is to develop the personality of its members in preparation for complete living. develop the personality
Yeah.
for complete living. That's
Yeah.
deep. That's not just a social club tagline.
Not at all. It points to something transformative, right?
Yeah.
Something foundational.
Yeah.
And tied right into that development is the bond, the friendship. The sources talk about making lifelong friends.
That feeling of connection.
Yeah, and the sort of comfort in knowing you might have a friend, a connection, pretty much anywhere you go, just because of that shared affiliation. And the material gives that powerful historical example, doesn't it? From James S. Avery Sr.'s autobiography.
Oh, yes. That story is incredibly telling. Avery talks about traveling in the segregated South, right? Finding safe places to stay was a huge challenge back then.
Constant worry, I imagine.
Absolutely. And he describes how vital his fraternity network, Omega Psi Phi in his case, was. He says, whenever we traveled in segregated areas and needed accommodations, Omega men helped provide them. He calls it a network of college men linked by friendship, mutual interests, and respect.
Just wow, that really hits home. It shows the depth of that network, the very real support it offered, especially when facing systemic barriers. A literal friend in a potentially hostile place.
Exactly. It illustrates that complete living idea in a very tangible, historical way. And the source makes the point that, okay, the context is different now, but that unique bond, that sort of sacred friendship, it's still a cornerstone today.
But it's not just about friendship and support, right? The sources also mention work.
Right. As important as all that is, the material is very clear. There is, and I quote, plenty of work to be done.
Ah, okay. The service component, that's central to BGLOs, isn't it?
Absolutely central. They have this really rich, ongoing history of community service, civic engagement. The sources flat out state there's meaningful work available in any of these organizations that can directly impact Black communities, both locally and globally.
And they give examples like voter registration.
Voter registration drives, mentoring young people, working with folks that's experiencing homelessness, things like that. Real impactful work.
So if you decide to join, the expectation is you'll actively pitch in with these kinds of mandated programs and service projects. That's baked into the commitment.
It is. You'd definitely be expected to play a role, an essential one. But, before you even get there, the sources circle back to a really basic question. Is this even the right fit for you personally?
Right.
They actually caution, and I'm quoting again, just because you want to join a BGLO does not mean the culture is for you.
Okay, so how do they suggest you figure that out before taking the plunge?
The main advice is to take time. And they really emphasize considerable time to genuinely get to know active, productive members of the specific organization you're interested in.
Not just a casual hello.
No, definitely not. They recommend really getting familiar with a local chapter by going to as many of their public events as you can. They even warn one or two will not do.
Because chapters themselves can vary, even within the same national organization.
Exactly. The source says, like people, chapters have distinct personalities. So it's really important to make sure the specific chapter you're considering actually reflects the founder's mission and vision.
And not something diluted.
Or, as the source puts it, not a distorted facsimile of what it's supposed to be.
Okay, so the overall message from these sources seems to be thoughtful, be intentional, do your homework, don't just jump in.
Precisely. It all seems to come back to aligning the organization and even the specific chapter with who you are at your core. That phrase comes up again.
Right, because if it doesn't align...
Well, they give a pretty strong warning that if the organization just fundamentally isn't a match for who you are, deep down, you could really end up regretting it later if things don't work out the way you hoped.
Okay, so let's recap this deep dive then. We've walked through your sources, looking at the different reasons why someone might think about joining a Black Greek letter organization. We've really underscored the commitment involved. It's significant, though manageable, especially if you're trying to balance it with a full life, like at the graduate level. We've touched on the deep connections, those bonds of friendship, and also the really crucial service opportunities that are so central to BGLO life.
Yeah, the work aspect.
Right. And we've seen they're presented as voluntary associations built on shared values, rich history, definitely not casual clubs, and certainly not the high control groups some stereotypes might suggest.
A key distinction.
Absolutely. The sources really stress figuring out if that commitment level works for your current life stage and making sure the organization and the specific chapter genuinely reflect the founder's original mission. It all seems to boil down to needing that fit with who you are at your core for it to be truly fulfilling.
Exactly. And, that brings us to maybe a final thought for you to sit with. based on everything we've just talked through from these sources.
Okay.
Given that these organizations are described as being dedicated to developing the personality for complete living, and they clearly require deep commitment, how much is joining about finding an organization that already fits who you are right now, versus how much is the actual act of joining and really engaging with that organization about shaping who you become down the road?